You spent some time in Austin, Texas. Now, for transparency, I'm a Texan, fifth or sixth generation Texan,
great, yeah.
born and raised there. But I'm interested in your experience. You moved to Austin and lived there for quite a while. What was that like? And what did you learn from it?
Well, I thought I knew America. I thought I'd been around it for 40 odd years and I knew many Americas. And I was impressed. And when my kid, the kid that followed Carrack, when he was young, he used to come on tour with me with his skateboard. And I used to buy a big Rand McNally map of the United States, which every year has new roads. And I've got a bigger one all the time now. I'm nearly blind. And I used to hit the road in a rental car. And I used to plan my touring based on places I hadn't yet explored. So I could go from Norfolk, Virginia, across the Blue Ridge Mountains and then go, the Smoky Mountains and down into Tennessee. It was brilliant, all that stuff. And Texas, I played there. And then I thought, well, Austin, surely that's where Jimmy Vaughan comes from. That's where all these guys have gone to, all these musicians. And I went there and I met all these guys and I went, wow, there's more musicians per square mile there than anywhere else on the planet, even Nashville. And also they had more attitude, I think, than the Nashville. There was more of a kind of Tex-Mex type of rock and roll element to it. There was the Continental Club, which is a brilliant hang. Right. So I went down there and without further ado moved in.
But you eventually left. You liked it. You liked a lot of things about it, but you eventually left.
Many reasons. But I guess really I used to go home quite a lot, back to England. And the relief of opening the door of the airplane when you got back to a temperate climate was like, whoa, Although I'm a drifter in many respects with a silver spoon, I must say that maybe because I already lost my boy and my family have ached ever since, I think I was missing family. Even though I have been transient for the last 53 or 4 years, So there was something about going back. But there was also the feeling of defeat, because I really didn't want to go back, but I was just drawn. And so there are a lot of factors behind it.
When you're not singing, when you're not consumed by music, and I recognize you are much of the time, what do you like to do? You said you like to travel, you like to drive around. What else do you like to do?
Well, I'm a terrible sort of hack tennis player. I love playing tennis. I mean, doubles these days, of course. Less running around. But I mean, that, and I play five-a-side soccer on a Wednesday night in the village where I live. And I try and find my family, and you look after the kids and then you got to find them later. Because I live sort of maybe 8 miles from where I went to school. I mean, there's a very comfortable and humorous rapport with all my neighbors and friends. It's a good life.
I noticed that you always referred to England or Great Britain. And when you spoke of going home before, you're talking about going to Wales, right?
The Welsh borders, yeah.
What is there about Wales? I mean, obviously there's always the magnet of home, there's the draw of home. But what particularly about Wales? You talked about Austin and your experience in America.
Well,
what is there about Wales?
I could never have been a Texan. It was too late. It was too late down the line. And I can't be Welsh or maybe even English, really. I'm just a guy who lives in those islands. But when I was a kid, as my father hauled us out of that grey, we spent a lot of time. He had a car that was held together by wire and welding. And we used to always go out into the Welsh hills, exploring castles and churches. And I was completely enamored by this fact that 500 years earlier than these days, in the 1950s, there were Welsh princes. There was a culture that not only still has its own language, but it had entirely its own culture and its own history and its own stories and its own links and its own legends and its determination to be independent from the German English, you know. There's still that hangover because the English were an invading force in Britain. And as a sort of I guess, amateur historian, I was always very interested in the way that it worked, the fact that it's still not. In that song about a wall and not a fence, it talks about the English and the Scottish and the Irish and the Welsh. I mean, really, you know, there's no distance in between people. There's never any distance, but there's a million miles of distance, and it's inherent. It's a shame, but it's a fact. And so Wales has always intrigued me because it is definitely a land of mystery, which has been dwarfed really by contemporary travel and by every single communication and every single chain of stores, restaurants, supermarkets. The whole thing has now become one great big, you know, blob.
But it does have this mystic past,
Yeah.
if you will. Maybe this is too far a stretch. I want to ask you that some of Led Zeppelin's music and some of your own music, it's been suggested to me, has some mysticism about it. Is that connected to what you're talking about with the history and the, if you will, magical stories about the Wales of past?
Yeah, I think so. Not that I know anything particularly specific about anything, but that it's there. And it's still there in the spirit of the people too, that the knowing that they're different and that it's a different story. I can't put my finger on it, and as you can, if you were to ever trawl these songs, I touch on it. I talk about seasons, I talk about landscape. I think if you're the 15th generation of people from the same place, there are certain places that you would go which are really special and you don't even know why. I think that's beautiful.
I agree. And now we're getting down to something where I hoped we'd be. When you talk about Wales and Welsh history, your eyes get a faraway look. I don't know what the soldiers call a 500 or 1,000 yard stare. That leads to the question, Robert. I mean, everybody knows who you are publicly. Who are you as a person? As a man, who are you?
How many weeks have I got to try and figure out how to begin to say? I can't analyze or summarize myself, really. I think first of all, I'm a very fortunate character I've been given a lot of gifts, and not all of them are evident, but to inquire, to have avid interest in the time and space in which you live, and to cherish it. And maybe that's because I lost my boy. Maybe that was the gateway into manhood, because then I had to have real shoulders. There was no more, you know, the kind of tea dance had finished, really. And so who I am, I suppose I'm a bunch of resonances from all the things that have happened to me. And at the back of it all, the kind of buffer that keeps me okay is all that abstract stuff that makes my songs come to life and makes my life like it is. I mean, I don't make these songs up as if I don't know who I'm singing about, you know. And they're not prolific and profound, really. They're just meanderings from a guy who's got his eyes open.